Welcome to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with, as always, my co-host, John Barker. And John's the 70th District. And John, this is Friday afternoon as we shoot another Legislative Updates. And I know on Monday you're headed back to the legislature. And normally we have you bring in a guest with you that comes in, but you've got so much material, we said let's just go through this with you, because this is the time now where, what do you call that when you go back there on Monday? What is it?
It was initially called the second veto session because the Supreme Court this week heard arguments on the maps, the redistricting maps, the congressional maps, the Senate maps, and the House maps. They took arguments in the morning on one and arguments in the afternoon on the congressional maps. Within 48 hours, they rendered a decision. They found that the Senate and the House maps were good, and it was a unanimous decision. And then on the congressional maps, they said that they were good, but there was some dissent. You know, the 7 members on the Supreme Court, I would imagine 1 or 2 of them dissented, but it was still approved. So we thought we would go back and spend 3 or 4 days redrawing maps, but we don't have to do that. So I think Monday we'll go back. We'll attempt to override a couple of the governor's vetoes. And then my understanding is we're going to make that sine die, which is the official last day of the legislature. And then we're finished for the year.
So you may be not maybe won't be done on Monday, but maybe Monday or Tuesday.
I'm hoping Monday evening.
It'd just be a late day, one of those late days.
Could be a late night.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So what's going to be coming up on Monday then?
On Monday we're going to talk about a number of things, but what I want to talk about is this is a piece of legislation that voters will see in August the 2nd, which is our primary date. It's a House Concurrent Resolution 5003, commonly called Value Them Both. It's a constitutional amendment that people will be voting on, and I thought I would just go through some of the history and how we got here.
Okay.
And I think there'll be some slides up on the screen as I go through these.
Okay.
But I was just telling it's about abortion. From 69 to 2012, based upon the Roe decision. In 69, the Supreme Court said abortions could be done. But in Roe v. Wade, which is a 1973 decision by the United States Supreme Court, they decided that it's a federal issue, and that all the state laws that had restricted abortion were no longer in existence, that we had to follow federal law. So that's what started this in 73. What's interesting, it's been nothing but controversy since that time. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was a very liberal justice, before she passed away a couple of years ago, she even said it was wrongly decided, because it was decided on privacy. And her indication was, well, under the Bill of Rights, there's no indication of privacy was needed, but she thought it was wrongly decided. She thought they should have picked another case to make that decision. But since Roe v. Wade, the state of Kansas has passed several laws that have restricted abortion. Some of them have been held constitutional, some of them have not been held constitutional. The one in 92, which was revised in 97, 2000, 2011, 13, and 14, requiring counselors of minors, specifically before they get an abortion, allow minors to seek abortion without guardian's consent, and that had some weak controls on it. And then a 22 definition, but allows, that's the 22-week, no abortions after 22 weeks. And that had some really weak language. In 97 to 2000, and we updated it in 2011, the Women's Right to Know, that has to do with attempts to make expectant mothers aware of the fetal heartbeat. They have to do this 24 hours before they have an abortion, trying to discourage, and it's in an ultrasound form. In 98 and updated in 2011, the Partial Birth Abortion Act prohibits partial birth abortion procedures. and that was, I believe, held unconstitutional. In 13, it had disallowed wrongful death suits from not having abortion. And in House Bill 2253 defines life begins at fertilization, unlawful to abort for gender selection, and gives parents, guardians right in decision processes, and prohibits the use of public funds to pay for abortions. That was passed in Senate Bill 142 and House Bill 2253. In 2004, and I actually voted for that bill. In 2014, we passed Senate Bill 54, which has the definition of bodily functions and medical emergencies, strikes the words objective, non-judgmental, and scientifically accurate, and cleaned up language for fetus less than 22 weeks. 2015, we had Senate Bill 95. It created Kansas Unborn Child Protection and Dismemberment. This is a dismemberment, the bar from dismemberment. We've talked about that before, where they actually go in and dismember the fetus, the baby, and take it out a piece at a time.
I've seen footage of that.
It's not for the public.
No, no.
You know, we don't do that to animals.
No, no.
You know, and in fact, we actually have a law against it doing it to cattle.
That's right. I've heard that.
But we do not have it for human beings.
Yeah.
So we passed that, which caused this to come out. That led, it was appealed, and it was appealed to the district court, or no, it was taken to district court. And the Judge Hendricks, a district judge in Shawnee County, found for the plaintiffs, which was two abortion doctors, Hody and Nasir, and then it went up to that said they could do that. Then it went up to the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals decided to hear the case en banc, which is all 14 of them. Mm-hmm. And they heard the appeal, and they divided 7-7. And so that caused it to go to the state Supreme Court, which took their time. But in 19, the House and the Senate passed Senate Concurrent Resolution 1606 because New York State had actually opened it up to abortion on demand. So we sent a resolution up there telling the New York legislators, not that we have any authority over them, protesting the passing of that. Then the same year, we also passed Senate Bill 67, requires notice to be available to women who changed their mind after receiving the first dose of RU 486. And this is a bill that Dr. Epley, one of our doctors that is in it, talked about quite a bit, and very supportive of this, because if you take the first pill, it's a 2-day procedure, and should you take that, there are remedies to reverse this medical abortion.
Is that on the 486?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and that's the reason we wanted notice giving to the women, should they change their mind after receiving the first dose of RU 486, that the effects may be reversed if she changes her mind. And we just wanted people to know that, women to know that. So we did pass that, and it was vetoed by the governor, by the way. And we did that in 19. So this governor has won it.
Kelly?
Yeah. So this is how we got to where we're at today. The history of the decision, the two abortion physicians, Hody and Nasser, sued the state following the passage of Senate Bill 83, Shawnee County District Court. Judge Hendricks granted a motion for preliminary injunction, which means they couldn't do them. State requested the Court of Appeals to review en banc, which they did. They divided 7-7. As a result, it was sent automatically to the Kansas Supreme Court. They waited until the end of the session of 19 to render their decision. The personal opinions were that they found a constitutional right in our state constitution to have an abortion without restrictions. that was very controversial. Couldn't believe they found that in a constitution that was written
many
drafted,
years before.
Yeah. In the late 1800s and stuff.
Yeah.
But that's what caused the legislature that year to come back, and we decided that we needed a constitutional amendment. And the constitutional amendment was pretty simple. There'll be a copy of it that will be on screen for you to look at. I know I helped draft this constitutional amendment. It was written very carefully and specifically states that the right of an abortion is not in the state constitution, and that the people, through their elected representatives, may regulate abortion. And it requires, which this constitutional amendment required 2/3 vote in both chambers, which we received. The governor didn't have to decide it, and we had to decide a date that we would have the vote. And we decided we would do it, this was last year, that we would do it August the 2nd of this year, so that both sides would have an opportunity to go out and inform the public. But House Concurrent Resolution 5003 passed both chambers as required with the 2/3. We put it on the ballot, and what you may be seeing now is the House Concurrent Resolution. Section 1 is very simple. It states, because Kansas values both women and children, the Constitution of the state of Kansas does not require funding of abortion and does not create a secure right to an abortion. To the extent permitted by the Constitution of the United States, the people, through their elected representatives and state senators, may pass laws regarding abortion, including but not limited to laws that account for the circumstances of the pregnancy resulting from rape or incest, or circumstances of necessity to save the life of the mother. That, for 200 years, has always been the rights of the state legislature. You go back to the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which says those rights that are not mentioned in the Bill of Rights and in the Constitution are reserved to the states. And we have always had that until 1973 with Roe. Now, following that, which will be on the ballot, that's the language. There's also, as you well know, Doug, there's always has to be an explainer to any constitutional amendment. And the constitutional amendment explainer tells people, and we write it without any legalese, in plain language. Mm-hmm. In fact, we try to write it in a language that an 8th grade student can understand, because we want everybody to understand it. The explainer in this says, the value them both amendment would affirm there is no constitutional right to abortion or to require the government funding of abortion, and would reserve to the people of Kansas, through their elected state legislators, the right to pass laws to regulate abortion, including but not limited to, in circumstances of pregnancy resulting from rape or incest, or when necessary to save the life of the mother. A vote for value them both amendment would affirm there is no constitutional right to abortion or to require the government funding of abortion, and would reserve the right to the people, through their elected state legislators, the right to pass a law to regulate abortion. A vote against the value them both amendment would make no changes to the Constitution of the state of Kansas, and could restrict the people, through their elected state legislators, from regulating abortion by leaving it in place, the recently recognized right to abortion. That's what value them both will say on the ballot. It was a constitutional amendment, but that's what's going to be on the ballot.
And okay, and that's already guaranteed it'll be on the ballot, or is this what's coming up on Monday that's going to be addressed to?
No, it's already on the ballot. We passed this last year.
Good deal. All right, we're going to cut away, take a break. You're watching Legislative Updates. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with co-host John Barker. And, of course, John's the representative from the 70th District. And this is Friday, and so on Monday, John's going back to the legislature, and it is called second veto.
Well, We hopefully it will be sine die, which is the official last day of the legislature.
Okay.
But initially we called it second veto because we thought we'd have to veto more issues or take up the maps.
Yeah.
Right.
And the first segment that we did was very helpful. I got a lot of understanding out of that. Where do you want to go now?
Well, I just wanted to give a brief overview of how we did this last year and in the time period that we did it in. I mean, it's kind of amazing. You know, I was involved in the drafting of the constitutional amendment, and then I introduced it in the House on the 12th of January. Initially, it was called 21 RS0040, so it was the 40th bill that was introduced, but since we had pre-filing, that was pretty early in the session. I think it was the first week of the session. I actually set a hearing 3 days later on the 15th of January, and I had 64 conferees that come in, opponents and proponents for the bill.
Was it pretty much an even split, or?
Oh, it was pretty close. It was pretty close. I gave each side the same amount of time.
Okay.
And we had, but the opponents were quite a few of out-of-state organizations that came in that were opposing the bill. And then on the 21st of January, I opened it up in my committee after the hearing, because I wanted people, when you get 64 pieces of testimony, you know, there's a lot of reading there.
Yeah.
So I wanted my folks to be able, my committee to be able to read everything, have some understanding. Of course, questions were limited, but they were able to contact all the conferees. They would supply phone numbers if they had specific questions they wanted clarified. And then on the 21st, I opened it up and worked the bill, which is being to pass it out favorably. Had a number of amendments that were brought by the Democratic Party. None of them prevailed. We took just about most of my time in committee that day, but we did pass it out. I gave it to my vice chair, who was on the show at the beginning of the session, Tori Armberger Blue.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very, very sharp young lady to carry on the floor. It was a very serious piece of legislation, but I told her, I said, you carry it, I'll be there with you in case you get any questions. She did an excellent job, and so we got more votes than we needed. We had the 2/3, and so it was passed out. The Senate, on the Senate side, passed the bill, but they were behind us, so they actually took our bill and passed it. So the bill that we have out there is a House bill. But to go back to when the Supreme Court made the decision in 19, just want to touch on a couple of things. One is, because they found an absolute right to an abortion, we lost, or it's been struck down, the live dismemberment abortion ban that we had. We passed in 15. They also struck down the clinical safety, sanitation and inspection law was struck down. And I remember being in that hearing, and they had went to an inspection of the clinic, the abortion clinic. There was blood stains on the carpet. I remember the testimony vividly, and that they were cleaning their instruments in a normal household dishwasher, which is not a sterile environment. And so that's the reason we passed that, but that has now been struck down. It's shocking.
Oh, why don't we cut away, take a break? We'll be right back. You're watching Legislative Updates. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my co-host, John Barker, who's, of course, the representative of the 70th District. And we're talking specifically about the abortion laws. And, John, thank you so much for the involvement that you have done in all of this work and part of the legislation and the things that you've done. And where do you want to go?
Well, you know, Doug, thank you for that. And this, I feel, is the most important piece of legislation that I have been involved in. I introduced it in the House, worked it in my committee. It's the most important piece of legislation I will probably ever do, because I'm going to save lives. But let's talk about since the Supreme Court decision. In Kansas in 2020, there were 7,542 abortions. In 2021, there were 7,849.
Numbers going up.
Numbers going up every year. Since the 19, when they made the decision, 13% increase in overall abortions, 17% increase in dismemberment abortion, and 16% in out-of-state abortions. We're getting to the point where we're going to have more out-of-state abortion, residents from out of state, than we do in state.
Because the states surrounding us have different laws, and
Right.
ours are more liberal, that they're able to come in with less restrictions and proceed with the abortion. Am I right?
That is correct. Other legislators have, they don't have the Supreme Court decision that we've been handed. So they still have restrictions on theirs, and we do not. So that's the reason other states, Texas, apparently in the future, probably Oklahoma, because they've just passed some restrictions, that we're going to have more. This will be a destination for abortions. And I don't think the folks in the state of Kansas want that. And that's the reason it is so important with this legislation that folks, voters show up on the 2nd of August and read the constitutional amendment that's been proposed and vote yes. That's the important thing to do. That's very important.
And that date comes up. When will that be?
That'll be the primary.
The primary.
The primary, and you know the Democrats wanted to shift it to November because they thought they would have a better chance. We wanted it on the primary because we have more primary elections within the Republican Party, and there is a very large grassroots group that are going out and educating Kansans on the importance of value them both. We're not banning abortion. We're just going back to what it was prior to 73 and allowing state legislators, which are answerable to the people every 2 years, if you're in the House, and they can regulate it. Let the people's house regulate it, not the courts. But that's where we're at. So hopefully it passes.
Well, I hope so, and I know it's going to be a tough day up there, and because there's just a split that's taking place. And
Yeah.
but I appreciate it, John. Thank you so much, and we're going to cut away, take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. This will be the final segment of this show here, and if you've been following through, why you know that John's going back to the legislature on Monday, and the topic is going to be, is the correct title value them both, or is it?
No, we're just going back to overrides. The value them both we passed last year, but this is such an important bill that I wanted to talk about it today because the primary, August 2nd is the date, and we're going all over the state of Kansas telling the people what it means if you don't pass it.
All right. And I can tell you we just got a few seconds left, but if you haven't seen a partial birth abortion, man, it'll touch your heart. And it's different if you're a young guy, that you've got a different target when you're in your teens or somewhere along in there, and then you get to be a dad and a grandfather. Everything takes a different perspective for you. Hope you've enjoyed watching Legislative Updates with John Barker. Take care.